This is HighIntensityBusiness.com with Lawrence Neal, helping you achieve your health and fitness goals. Become a great personal trainer and build your high-intensity strength training business.
Lawrence Neal here, and welcome back to HighIntensityBusiness.com. Today's guest is Logan Herlihy. How do you say your last name again?
Herlihy.
Herlihy, that's
close.
it.
Herlihy with the low.
Didn't I tell you I was going to get all nervous during it? I did, didn't I? Yeah. I thought, you know what? I'm not even going to be able to pronounce his middle name properly here, which is also what happened.
which you didn't pronounce correctly, but that's okay.
Even though you taught me about 5 times. Anyway, So continuing with the introduction, Logan is a graduate at the University of Central Florida in Orlando, the real 2017 college football national champions, whatever that means. He graduated with a degree in communications with a minor in exercise science. Logan has been an avid gym goer for the better part of 2 decades, but only came to the field of evidence-based exercise in the last 3 years. In that time, he's worked for a Renex super slow facility in Minnetonka, Minnesota called My Strength Studio, and for the last 10 months has been part of the team at Discover Strength in both the Woodbury and Plymouth locations. In the last 3 years, Logan has overseen 3,000 plus one-on-one and small group sessions and continues to be a student of the research and the great pioneers before him. This spring, Logan published his first book, How to Look Good Naked, the least amount of effort to look the best with your clothes off, which is currently available on Amazon and has a 5-star rating. Logan, welcome to the show, mate.
Oh, thanks for having me, Lawrence. I'm super excited to be here.
You're welcome. How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing well. Sorry, we're in between sessions right now. I'm at Woodbury, so we've got some people coming in and out, but I'm good, man. Just up early, ready to talk to you.
Awesome. No, that's fine. I love seeing the kind of hive of productivity that is Discover Strength. You know, I'm not fussed by a little bit of interruption. I think you guys are doing great work, and do my best to try and support you and promote you guys where I can. So, we got to meet at Rec 2019, which was really cool. We got to have a little conversation there in the when you were working at the studio. And how did you find being part of Rec? I'd just be interested in your experience.
It was incredible. So, I mean, I heard a lot of things beforehand from everyone about what it was like and just the environment of having all those people together in the same place. And it was more than I even imagined. And obviously, I think you've been in the past. We changed a few things this year. It was all new to me. But from what I heard, like the rapid presentations, just the way the keynotes were set up, having Chaz, I think that was his name, the guy from the Vikings, is like a bonus speaker. It was just great. Everybody was so friendly. I got to meet my idol, Doug McGuff, who's a lot shorter than I was expecting, but super jacked. So that was great, man. And it was so fun to do the workout too. I just had a blast doing that with everybody. So.
Yeah. What was your highlight for you? Was it meeting Doug, or was there something specific you heard from a keynote?
So obviously the keynotes were great, and I really like Jeremy Lowenecki. I found him to be super dry and hilarious. I love that style of humor. But I think the pinnacle for me was, 1, I got to meet Doug, and 2, I got to do the manual resistance triceps with him. So my coworker was like, he knew I was a big fan, and he's like, you can have Doug. And then he actually took a book, and one of my books, How to Look Good Naked. And we chatted about it for a little while, and he gave me some advice on, stay away from publishing companies because they'll steal all your money, and, go the self-publishing route. And it was awesome, man. So.
Yeah, he's great like that. I remember years ago now, probably must be like 6 years ago now, when I first got going, I first started creating content. I think because he was my first guest, and this one might have been either the first interview.
Ever?
Yeah, Doug was, yeah.
What?
Yeah, which is again another thing. It's like, how are you able to get Doug as your first guest on the podcast when you had no following? But he was just, I mean, his profile is probably a lot bigger now, but his profile then was still quite, he's still quite well known. And I was shocked. I remember emailing him thinking, well, what have I got to lose? And then his assistant came back to me and said, let's schedule this. I was like, wow. And he was like he really kickstarted it for me and definitely gave me the help sort of develop my own passion for doing it more. But what I was going to say is I self-published an ebook ages ago, which for me, it's okay, but I'm a little bit embarrassed about it, so I don't promote it too much. And there's probably loads of stuff in there that I don't agree with anymore. But that's the way it is with content. You create content, be it a podcast or an ebook, and then you change your mind. And it's just if you operate where you're like, well, I won't put anything out if I'm going to change my mind, then you'll never put anything out, you know. So anyway, that's
100%.
a whole other rabbit hole you can go down.
Yeah. So I mean, I've tried to write books in the past before, and it just never worked because I couldn't set anything down in stone. And when I finally did this one, it was like I didn't touch it for a year and a half almost because everything changed in my life. Like I still agree with a lot of the things in there, but so much has changed. And if I went back and kept putting my hands on it, it would never get done. So it's impossible, you know, if you're trying to evolve. So.
Yeah, you just got to be comfortable being wrong a lot. That's all. And just hoping that some of the stuff you say is right. But I mean, credit to Doug. Thing I was going to say is, you know, I think he published a blog post that week or a few weeks later after just being on the show, and he embedded the link to my ebook there. And I doubt he'd even really vetted it. I mean, maybe he flicked through it. I don't know, but I told him that, like, it was basically Tim Ferriss's slow carb diet and your training combined, and that's it, because no one had put that in a single spot. I mean, Tim kind of did it in the 4-Hour Buddy, but he didn't go in as much detail as I did with high intensity training. So
we basically wrote the same book, Lawrence.
We wrote the same book.
We did, essentially, right?
Yeah.
Because I like to say that my book is Body by Science meshed with, the Bulletproof Diet. So
right, similar idea. No, it's. I mean, totally. You know, I just like that about Doug. I like that he knows, and I don't think you'd mind me saying this, that we're probably not giving him Shakespeare. We're not giving him products and books that are like completely original, right? I mean, you even said that to me. You said, look, this is basically Body by Science for lay people, right? It's like, you know, I think you said something like that to me. And Doug knows that, but he's like, he sees there's this goodwill and good nature, and he wants to promote that. And I love that, but you know, the way he is. But no, great event. I really enjoyed it. It was great meeting people like Doug and lots of people there who I've, you know, had on the show. Now I was just, I wanted to talk a little about your story. And I was going through your book actually before this, as you know. And you said your weight at the moment is around 161, 165. Are you still hovering around that? Because when I saw you in person, I was like, you look a lot heavier than that.
So again, set the book down and then don't go back to it for a while, right? When I wrote that, I don't know if you got to the part where I say, there's a chance that I'll want to put on 30 pounds of muscle in the next year, but I don't see that happening. Well, guess what happened? I put on 20 pounds of muscle. So I was down to about 160 at 6 to 8% body fat when I finished writing that book. Right now, I actually did a bod pod the other day because I knew I was coming on here, and I am at 184 at 12%.
Wow. Okay.
So I mean, it's 23 pounds or something since then. It's probably 2 years ago that I finished like actually writing that book, and now it's just kind of come to fruition. So
that's incredible, because I probably now look like your picture in the book, right, where you were like at that 161, 165 at 8% body fat. And I do get, you know, people say to me quite a lot, in comments on YouTube and things like that, like, oh, you know, you're when you talk about your genetic limits, you're not, you know, it's not necessarily true. Like, Lawrence, you could add more muscle if you did X, Y, and Z, and you've probably heard a bunch of conversations happen around that on the show. But I'm very curious, because I think you're a bit younger than me, aren't you? Are you 30? Is that correct? Or
31? Yeah.
Okay, so I'm 32, so similar age.
Yeah, but you said that in your email, and I laughed about it. I was like, "How old does he think I am?" Because he's like a young person in training.
I thought you were like 25. Seriously, I did. I thought you were like 25. No joke. But that's another testament to HIIT, right? Yeah, and good diet. Stay young.
And you just see all the people at Discover Strength. They're all 23, 25. So Luke likes to get them young and get them moving in the right direction. So
I got to know then, what is it? Because you've been training for a while, so I would have thought you would have got many of your newbie gains already, and that's very, very surprising to hear you achieve that. So, and I'm assuming you did that naturally. So, What did you do? What did you change to do that?
So I think it's just drastically changing diet. And in the book too, you'll notice I was working out every 7 to 10 days at that point as well. So I find it's really hard to increase tissue size and I think I heard you talking about this recently too. Like there's something to, if I want to increase hypertrophy, working out a little more often might be the best way to do that.
That's what gym you're thinking about.
Gym. Yep, it was gym. So, if I just want to maintain, which is what I was doing at the time, I was still seeing strength increases, but I was, fasting up to 18 to 20 hours every day. I was doing really strict keto at the time. So I dropped 20 pounds in 2 months, maybe something like that, when I really started strictly adhering. And then it was just a matter of like keeping it off. And, I wasn't eating enough, I don't think, to continue to build muscle really. But, I've gone through that fluctuation over and over throughout my strength training career. When I was 17, and I talk about that as well, I put on 50 pounds my senior year of high school. So I went from 140, which is, I was going to think about kilo conversions before I came on here, and I didn't do it.
No, don't worry. No one. This is people always say that, but the majority of listeners are American, so I won't worry about the conversion. And I know the differences. So
gotcha. So I was like about $135, $140, 135, 140 pounds going into my senior year of high school. I finished at 195 to 200 pounds, and that was partially just a big influx of testosterone just from going through puberty. I was a late bloomer. But ever since then, I just have kind of been on this, you were talking the other day, I forget the gentleman's name, about, muscle dysphoria and just that kind of up and down that we all seem to have in the gym. So I would get big and then I wanted to get shredded again. So I'd get shredded and I'd be super drastic with my diet. And then I was like, I'm too skinny. I got to get big again. And I still struggle with that, finding that right balance. Right now, I'm like, should I get back to 160? And it's like, no, I like
that's funny to me, mate. That's funny to hear that. And this is always, it's always you're self-imposing that on you. But you look great. I mean, I saw you at Rec. You look like someone who is like, reached their. I mean, you could have more muscle to gain, but you already look like you're peaking in my eyes. I mean, I could be wrong, but
I feel like I'm probably at the top end right now. But then I see you have Jay Vincent on, and I'm like, just want to, I know I'm not going to look like that, but doesn't mean I don't want to.
He's just a big ball of muscle, that guy. That's what he is. He is. So sorry, I broke your flow there, but tell me what you changed then since the book in terms of all the different variables.
So I find whenever I drastically change the style of training that I'm doing, I usually get, like you said, the newbie gains again. And then with that, I tend to, my diet fluctuates all the time too. I love keto. I don't eat strictly anymore that way. And sometimes I just want a cheeseburger with the bun, and I'm not super strict and lax about my carbs. And I just put on a little weight too. So when I started at Discover Strength, from going from super slow, I was doing what we do at Discover Strength, which is 2 times a week for 30 minutes, where before, I was once every 7 to 10 days, really focusing on my diet. Even though I know this is not the way to think about it, I go, I'm working out more. That means I can eat more. So I started at DS and I probably put on 10 pounds of fat as well as another 10 pounds of muscle. And I've kind of got that under control now. But I think the biggest thing is anytime you see a huge stimulus change, usually, at least in my experience, I'm going to see some kind of new gains, and then I typically level off. So
let's dig into this. So it's twice a week training with what, like an AB routine? Like, let's talk to me about the routine a little bit.
So my current routine at DS. So when I started at Discover Strength, I was basically just doing whatever was laid out in front of me, trying to kind of acclimate to the culture. Now I have my own version that's basically like a modified Big Five. I've got that in front of me right now. I don't ever do more than 8 exercises. And then occasionally I'll add in like some single joint stuff just from listening to James Fisher. He got me enthusiastic about bicep curls again. So I mean, I'm probably trying to ramp up the amount that I work out again, but I've been probably every 5 to 7 days now. So I was 2 times a week when I started at Discover, put on a bunch of muscle. I want to say it's been about 1 pound a month since I started. And then now I've kind of leveled out, but I'm seeing a slight dip again. So I might increase my frequency again. It's that constant back and forth. So,
okay. So you mentioned about the diet, you mentioned about how you're eating more carbohydrate, eating more in general. How are you measuring that? Is it just instinctive? I think I invented a word there.
Instinctual, that's a word, right?
Is that a word? Oh, it sounds kind of good, doesn't it? Maybe it is. But were you calorie counting at all, or, you know?
I don't count calories. I haven't since I put the book out. What I do every day is I fast. And I actually there's something I wanted to talk to you about at some point. I did a 3-day fast not too long ago. It ended up being 70 hours altogether. So I have my bulletproof coffee in the morning, and I do what's called, according to Dave Asprey, like a modified intermittent fasting. So I'll take 12 hours off at minimum between the last thing I eat and the first thing I eat or have that's not water. And then I use the coffee to just kind of extend my fasting period out. But on top of that, I just try not to eat too many simple carbs. I do have a bit of a sweet tooth. So I've got like these little ice cream bars that I have at home that I'll have one of those every day. Otherwise, I'll just go knock down, 6 donuts or something. So about self-control, I guess, to an extent. But fasting makes a huge difference. Just learning that hunger is not in control of me, I guess.
It's very liberating when you can do that. I love that. I recently, this weekend just passed, I took my fiance to Connemara National Park, which is north of Galway. It's just a really nice national park that's just in this enormous country area with only small towns around it. We hiked to the top of the mountain, 2/3 of the way up. She's pregnant, so we had to be careful. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I am. That is going to be announced on podcast before this one, actually. So, but obviously you haven't heard those yet. But we
try to keep it on the DL.
No, it's fine. I don't mind. But no, a point I was going to make is, I fasted in the morning because Saturday is kind of like a free day for us anyway. We kind of treat it like a cheat day kind of thing. Yeah. And so my plan was to do the hike, and then there's a really nice restaurant down by the base. And then we were going to go there afterwards, and I would just indulge and not really think about
it.
Right. knowing that I'd fasted for probably 18 hours, something like that, maybe a bit less than that. But I like that, to your point there, I like that feeling of feeling hungry, being out in nature, doing some kind of muscular work. It just feels like this is what we're meant to do. We're meant to expose ourselves to these kinds of conditions. And obviously these days where many of us are stuck inside a lot, we're not really mimicking those types of environments, those types of situations. So I try and do that as often as possible. So no, I agree. It's enormously liberating when you can get away from this idea of eating regularly, because so many people come from that culture where they think, to gain muscle, I need to eat 6 to 8 meals a day
all the time. And I used to do that, protein gainer, all the stuff. I can't work out now if I'm not fasted. I'm not really a morning person, but I find I'm at my best if I'm about probably 12 to 16 hours in without eating. 20 hours is kind of pushing it. Then I'm kind of on the low end of the sugar spectrum, and I need maybe a little boost before I go for it. But I don't like having something in my stomach. I think, to your point, there's something about exerting yourself when you've got nothing in your belly that maybe it's an evolutionary thing. We just push ourselves a little further. Maybe it's mimicking a hunt or something, whatever it might be. I think there's definitely something to that, keeping yourself on your toes in that sense. So
definitely. So what were the kind of macros? Are you eating high protein? What? Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
My diet is pretty all over the place at the moment. I was debating how honest I wanted to be with you about this. So my schedule's a little crazy.
Just let me say one thing quickly. I guess what I'm asking is questions in terms of when you were able to put on that size, what were the changes? So you can answer it for right now and then as well, I suppose, up to you.
So, I mean, it's really just when I started adding mass, I just stopped looking at calories altogether. And then I would say what I typically do, what my typical diet looks like, is I get a bunch of lean meat of some variety. So usually I'll get like a pulled chicken at like Costco. Do you have Costco? Do you know what that is?
I know of it, yeah.
Okay, yeah. So big warehouse store. So I'll go get a couple pulled chickens and I just have that on the side. And then I like cooking, but I don't always have time to do it. So usually what I'll do is I'll buy something that's pre-made and I'll add extra protein on top of it. So whether that be, I went through this phase where I was doing like these frozen fried rice things, which not very healthy at all, but they're only like 250 calories. Then I'd throw a bunch of extra chicken on top of there, add some extra vegetables. So it's almost just like a vehicle to get food in my mouth. And most of the time I just eat until I'm satiated, which after about 18, 20 hours is usually pretty hungry. But I've just found, and I know this is a horrible answer, that if I do that and I'm working out, I tend to put on a little bit of mass, and then I kind of have to balance it out because maybe I'm going too far and I'm having too many ice creams or whatever it is on top of it. So it's just a tightrope walk to an extent.
Was it still relatively low carbohydrate though? Like in terms of your macros, with carbohydrates being the smallest contributor?
So I actually found that when I wanted to put mass on, I had to increase my carbohydrate intake because when I was doing keto and I was just doing fat, I had a really hard time adding size because it was so efficient. I would just get so full. When I'm just eating high fat stuff, I can't really eat that much. And the benefit of carbs is that, or the detriment, depending on how you look at it, is I have a couple and then I want more. I could eat rice all day. I can't really eat T-bone steak all day. I could, it's delicious, but it's hard to overeat on, high fat meals and avocados and things like that. So I was making a lot of super high fat keto meals early on when I was dropping all that weight. And then I just kind of said, F all that. I'm just making sure that I'm fasting for 16 hours every day. And I basically eat what I want after that. So.
Got it. Okay. So you've put on whatever it is, roughly 20 pounds of muscle, and you've got up to 12% body fat. So do you think 12% is still relatively lean, but if you went leaner, do you think it'd be hard for you to hold on to that additional muscle mass if you dropped to 10 or below?
It would seem like, again, it'd be finding that balance of how much do I want to work out, because I enjoy the efficiency of only having to work out once every 7 days. But at the same time, I really like working out more often. So what I've actually added that I feel like has helped a lot is I sauna all the time now. And I'm a big fan of Rhonda Patrick. So I probably sauna 3 to 5 days a week. But yeah, I think if I dropped a little more body fat, it would be tough for me to maintain that same amount of lean mass, unless maybe I started working out more or switching up my workouts a little more frequently. That seems to be the way that I maintain, because otherwise I think it goes into the efficiency of the muscles. Once I get to a certain point and a certain strength level, I tend to drop off in lean tissue a little bit, but not lose any strength. So I think it's as I'm gaining, the muscles enlarge, and then maybe they shrink a little just for efficiency purposes. So
interesting. So let me just see if I understand this. So do you think that the main kind of variables that contributed to your increase in lean muscle was picking up the frequency a little bit, so then the stimulus being somewhat novel, although you've had to then taper that off now, combined with, and I suppose the main factor it sounds like was a slight increase in calorie intake whilst maintaining a window of fasting, and using additional carbohydrates to kind of help with that, because it can be hard to eat more protein and fat since they are very satiating. Is that a fair summary of the key things that went into it, do you think?
I would say so. And I mean, I try to keep my protein consumption relatively high as well. I'm not super strict to the extent that, I don't measure macros. So I'm not necessarily hitting that 0.7 grams that we talk about at Discover Strength every single day. But I think some days I probably blow past it and do 1.5 times. And other days I'm maybe 0.3. And the way I like to think about protein consumption as it deals with muscle protein synthesis is, I like to look at everything through the scope of evolution. So to me, it makes no sense. And I've had discussions with coworkers about this, that I have to have X amount of protein every day. It just doesn't make sense that humans would have evolved that way. Like if you get a buffalo and you eat as much of it as you can, your body's going to have to do something with that, all the macronutrients you're taking in. And then if you're starving for a week, well, we know that you can tap into your fat stores. So to me, it's just kind of, again, I say it's unsatisfying because I've kind of gotten to know my body a little bit more, and I don't think this is necessarily would work for everyone. But I know that if I just eat till I'm satiated, try not to eat too much ice cream, and then work out significantly enough, I tend to kind of balance myself out. Now that changing a few of those things might make more sense for somebody else, but that seems to work for me. So.
Yeah, really important point there. I think what's important to note here is, people might be listening to you and think, man, I've plateaued at whatever it is, 150, 160, 170 for so many years. And if I just do what Logan's doing, I'll get the gains I'm looking for, which is probably not true. I mean, you're an interesting anecdote. What you've done has worked well for you, but that's why we have to always come back to experimenting on ourselves and trying out different things to see what's going to be effective, or accepting the fact that, some of us might have reached our genetic potential. And I know that as one of the listeners, Ricky, if you're listening, which you probably are, you might get annoyed about me saying that, but that's just what I observe, and that's just my thoughts on this. But I encourage people, if it's really important to them to see what they can achieve, then by all means, try different protocols. Don't listen to what I say necessarily. Even for myself, I've recently outsourced my kind of health coaching accountability to my friend Gary Knight, who's been on the podcast.
Yeah.
And I occurred to me one day, I was like, it'd be quite cool to have someone keep me accountable and, just get someone else's. Gary's far more experienced than me, and he can give me a program, kind of take some of the thinking out of the whole process. Because I'm very guilty of program hopping. When you have a podcast, you get exposed to so many new ideas. You're like, oh, I've got to try them.
For sure.
But Gary's got a really nice system, and he's got me on a freeway split, which I've just started. And I'm
so
tracking
no more body weight stuff all the time.
Yeah, I moved away from pure body weight probably about a year ago, and I've been using machines since. Not as good as the machines you guys have, but the machines that I have access to. But this is more, I was doing more full body, whereas this is a freeway split. But it's like a Body by Science freeway split with with a bit more volume per session. So probably 4 to 6 exercises per workout, something like that. Okay. So not a lot more, but a bit more volume, because Body by Science is like minimalist as hell,
Gotcha. Are you doing different emphasis each day of the 3-day split?
Correct.
Or is it, okay,
yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so it's go on. Sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say I've experimented in the past before with still trying to do full body, but just kind of mixing up what I'm targeting each time. And that can be a nice change of pace. But I haven't often experimented with like total splits, like leg day. I did back in the day, but not so much since I've gotten into evidence-based exercise. So, but that's cool. Interesting. What have you noticed with the change?
It's too soon to tell. So I've literally done one workout, and I've tracked 4 days of eating since we've started.
Okay. So a little too soon. Yeah.
Way too soon. But I will be, we recorded a coaching session, which we're going to probably publish. So you'll actually get to hear, this is for a number of different, I guess, members of the audience that listen to this show is they'll get to hear Gary from a coaching perspective. So if they are thinking about being a coach, they can see how Gary does it, because I think he's very good at the way he does it. And then also as a trainee or someone who trains themselves and doesn't have a coach, they can kind of learn in terms of what Gary might advocate for getting results, what programming, diet, things like that. So yeah, it's going to be an interesting experiment. And I'm just pleased to be able to offload some of the kind of cognitive load, so to speak.
Yeah,
because obviously
for sure.
lot going on in my life at the moment, and the more I can outsource, the better, basically.
Yeah, for sure.
So I just wanted to talk about your story for a moment in terms of your kind of fitness journey, because I know that you've been into fitness for well over a decade now, and you know you've gone through a bit of a journey in terms of your learning, looking, you know, trying all the different types of, you know, protocols, traditional training, yoga, and then more recently kind of evidence-based, kind of high intensity training. So tell me about the moment, if you can, if there was a moment or maybe a series of moments where maybe you had an aha moment and you realized that, you know, high intensity training was probably the most effective protocol for you.
So yeah, I mean, I'll do the quick version, getting all the way up to there, just to kind of give you a little background. So I started working out with my dad when I was probably 7, 8, 9 years old. Like, he would just take me to the YMCA with him. He had no idea what he was doing. He still does not. He still does the same workout routine he probably did when I was 9. I tried to kind of coach him a little bit differently, but he basically just goes in and does glamour muscles and maybe, you know, leg press or something. Probably not even that. But that kind of was the foundation of me wanting to go in. I started, you know, being an athlete in middle and high school, and then got really interested in gaining weight and getting larger. But like many of us, that didn't really happen. So my senior year, when I put on that 50 pounds, it wasn't a Gold's Gym, but it was something like that, like an iron gym like that, where I just kind of immersed myself and just listened to what all the guys on steroids told me. So I started taking weight gainer and creatine and, you know, all the different things I could get my hands on. And I attributed it to my hard work, but really it was just because, you know, I was going through puberty at the time. So adding on top of that huge amount of volume that I was doing, I kind of blew up. Again, fluctuated on weight going back and forth through college. I probably gained and lost 500 pounds. I mean, no joke.
Wow.
Like, I'm going to put on 20 pounds and then I'm just going to be, I'm too big. I want to drop it all off again. So it was not uncommon for me, you know, to be 150 in college and then all the way up to 200 pounds again. Obviously not in a 2-week period, but I would go through these phases, right? But still really loved exercise. Got a minor from UCF in that. And then I really got into CrossFit, honestly, when I was like 23, 24. And I know
you can't say that on this book.
I know. I can't say this. I know. But that was honestly probably my first experience with poorly set up high intensity training. Because say what you will about CrossFit, and I talk a lot of shit about CrossFit, but there is something to going in and that competition level and working really hard and trying to beat the person next to you. So that was kind of my first experience with like, how far can I push myself? Well, I pushed myself far enough that I have a shoulder impingement that I'm still dealing with today, 5 years after it happened. And my shoulder is just totally screwed up. So again, I'm not an advocate of CrossFit, but that was probably my first kind of, how far can I push myself? Then I moved up to Minnesota about 3 years ago, and I interviewed with Kevin at My Strength Studio, who's an amazing guy, super nice guy, and really just kind of, he gave me my aha moment. So I had come in and I had this background on like high volume training, Arnold Schwarzenegger, you know, the more the better. I was definitely a 5 days a week for 2 hours a day type of guy. And I came in and he told me, we do 20 minutes twice a week. It's like, you're out of your freaking mind. But okay, I need a job. I'll believe whatever you tell me. So in the beginning, I was working out there twice a week. And then I was also working out probably 4 days a week on my own for the first 2 months. And then I finally was like, okay, I started reading Arthur Jones stuff. I jumped into Ken Hutchins' book, The Renaissance of Exercise, which it's hard to read that and see all the things that Ken talks about and then still believe that you should go out and work out 2 hours a day. So those two worlds, there was a lot of cognitive dissonance that was happening. And I just finally started to buy in. And I stopped going to the gym on my own. I canceled my membership to LA Fitness and I just worked out at My Strength Studio and I got great results. And I wasn't necessarily gaining a bunch of mass, but I was doing the bulletproof diet at the same time. So I actually lost a bunch of weight and I wasn't losing muscle. So that was the big thing. So I came in at probably 185 pounds, 190 when I started there, and then dropped down to about 160 by the time the book was done. And these are best guesses. I'm trying to remember correctly. But yeah, so I didn't lose a lot of muscle, but I didn't, I was losing all this fat, and I was still staying strong and getting stronger every time I came in. So that to me was enough to be like, there's something to this. And then the more I read Ken Hutchins stuff, and then I read Body by Science, and, I just couldn't deny the writing on the wall anymore. It was just too clear to me. And I really got interested, and I feel like I kind of outgrew what my strength studio had to offer, not because there's anything wrong with Super Slow or Renex, but I liked asking questions. And it was just a small shop, and Kevin was great about responding to me and answering all my questions. But once I found out about Discover Strength, and I went in and I interviewed, and, I sat down with Luke for the first time, and I'm sure you've asked Luke's questions, and he just goes, Logan, that is a fantastic question. Just the best question I've ever heard. It feels so good.
Very good Luke impression there.
I have really good questions. So I just love the atmosphere here and just the constant learning. And, one of our core principles is, continuing education and just continuing growth. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that the stimulus, I guess, was unfortunately CrossFit, that I can push myself really far. And then I found the Pandora's box and Renaissance of Exercise and Body by Science. And I've just never stopped since then. So I've just kept going, and I want to learn as much as possible.
Great. So, yeah, no, totally. Very interesting. And I'm always interested in what makes people get into HIIT, right? And, from what you said there, it seems to me that it's this combination of experiencing it and just being exposed to it a lot, learning from people like Kevin, who you work with, and then reading all of the books you just mentioned. And then obviously you've been just exposed to that more and more since. I think it's all of that. It's just so powerful and so convincing that that's how you get so passionate about this. And it kind of makes me think about, how do we get more people doing this? And I think, and I know you guys do a great job of this in terms of always educating your clientele, because I remember Luke telling me that, he's heard of so many instances where clients would leave and then they would go and do like CrossFit. And you're like, like for us in here, it's like major cognitive dissonance, because we're like, how can you do this and then go and do CrossFit or Orange Theory or whatever it is? Like, how is that even possible? But, you have to be able to see it from their perspective. They don't have the knowledge that you have. And it's our responsibility to be educating people and giving them these experiences.
And the first thing, I was super just dogmatic when I started, because it's like you said, like I felt like I found the light, and I just wanted to tell everybody about it. And I've had this kind of experience in the last 6 months or so where I'm getting less dogmatic, in the sense that I just want people to get in the door. And, I had an aha moment when I was listening to Jim Keen's podcast with you. And it was just like, I want to be approachable. I was listening to Joe Rogan a couple days ago too, and he had somebody on. I forget who it was, but said something to the effect of, the more you learn, it's like the further you out you get from the shoreline, as far as the shore being just the base level of information, the deeper it goes. Like the more I learn, the less I know. And I want to keep learning more. So how can I spread the message to people without being completely dogmatic and scaring them off? And if that means that they're going to go to CrossFit and Discover Strength, well, I want them in the door anyways. I want them coming here, and I will do my best to educate them and slowly, hopefully turn them around and get them on team high intensity. But this idea of like, nope, you can't be here. We're not doing kipping pull-ups, you idiot. Like, you're not winning any friends with that. And I think that's a problem that I see in the industry, is in high intensity training, especially, is we're so dogmatic, and how can we be more encompassing to people if we want them to jump in? So
I agree. I think that's the right mindset. I think I understand that kind of dogmatic approach comes from a compassionate place, because you're like, this is probably the safest, most efficient, most effective way to do things. But it's very difficult to bridge that gap by doing by being so dogmatic about it, you almost have to meet them where they are and slowly kind of pull them towards you is certainly the theme I'm picking up, having done all these podcasts, talking to people like you and people like Luke and other business owners, just hearing those that seem to have the most success seem to understand that best.
I'll just take a moment to
Sure.
say that I think the thing that separates Discover Strength and Luke specifically from other owners that I've seen is, especially when I was early on with Strength Studio, is there's so many people who want to do things the exact way that Ken Hutchins and Arthur Jones and all these people did before them, and they're so afraid to step outside the box and be business owners and be entrepreneurs that they just get pigeonholed into doing exactly what the book says, so to speak. And I have so much admiration for Luke just because he's willing to push the boundaries of what's acceptable, and that doesn't mean that it's a bad thing, but we experiment with stuff. We try new things. There's stuff that we do on a daily basis that maybe Drew Bay wouldn't like. But sure. Tough cookies,
Well, but important thing to note is Luke walks that fine line between what is seen as being, inappropriate from someone who is a very dogmatic, high-intensity training individual. But he doesn't go so far as to start using all this technology that is very, very suspect in terms of its ability to deliver benefits to human body. So that is what I like about, it's certainly from an outside looking, that's what it seems he's doing. He's not, Luke has never, ever, correct me if I'm wrong, you probably wouldn't correct me if I'm wrong on this. Luke is never going to suggest that you guys offer a service that is not going to deliver some sort of value. That, he would never be. And I sometimes feel like maybe there are some of the gadgets out there right now that are being proposed or used by even some of the high intensity training businesses and or smart gyms, which I'm not convinced they're that essential. But happy to be proven wrong on that. But,
if you brought the idea of bringing a vibration plate or something to Luke, same thing. That's a great idea. We're not going to do it, but that's a great idea. And he's so tactful in how he approaches that stuff. But no, I completely agree. All I'm saying is that we've been able to find a way to spread where other gyms in this arena have had trouble. And there's a lot of great business owners who maybe have aspirations of growing their business, but they have a hard time, it seems like, because they want to do things exactly the way that it's written out and the way that the hit gods have preordained things must be done. So that's all.
We got to take a short tour around my strength studio and got to meet Kevin briefly. And I love that because I think those machines are fascinating. The Renex Super Slow. I'm not sure.
Did you get to use any of them?
I got to use very briefly the overhead press.
Okay.
And I wanted to use that because obviously I've seen Doug using it. I think, is that the Super Slow? I don't know what it's called.
Renex. Renex is Hutchins' brand, and I'm pretty sure, built all of those by hand in his studio in Florida. Yeah. Those are extremely, extremely rare and hard to find. So Kevin's collection is, we gave that award to Mike Petrella. I think some of the stuff that Kevin has is pretty incredible. And that low back machine that he has there is on par, if not better, than the MedX core lumbar. Wow. So he's got a cool setup there for sure.
Yeah, I didn't see that one. But right, okay. So just so it'd be good for you to correct me on this. So is Renex and Super Slow, are they the same, or I thought they were kind of synonymous in terms of the...
So the Renaissance of Exercise was Ken Hutchins' book. Renex is his brand. Super Slow is the protocol. And then Super Slow and MedX came together to create the Super Slow. And I'm 90% sure about this. I'm sure McGuff or somebody else could correct me on this. But Super Slow and MedX came together to create Super Slow Zone. In like the 90s, there was a whole chain of those. Yeah. And then Ken Hutchins retrofitted a bunch of MedX machines with Super Slow cams so that you could do the 10-10 pacing. But I believe that's it. So it's it's three separate things. So there's Renaissance of Exercise, Renex equipment, MedX with Super Slow, and then Super Slow is the protocol.
Got it. Thank you for that. So the all the machines in my strength studio, most of those kind of unusual looking ones that aren't MedX or Nautilus are pretty much all Renex then.
Are Renex, yeah.
Got it. Okay, cool. Yeah, I mean, I thought they were great, and as I said, I really like the overhead press. I didn't get to use much of the others, but a friend of mine used the row, and he really liked that. And
the static row or the moving one?
It was a moving row. Yeah, I think it was where the seat. Is it where the seat moves?
The seat moves.
Yeah.
So the genius of Ken Hutchins, and I mean, I love MedX equipment. Like I think it's top notch, but the Renex is just incredible because you can actually adjust the cams on the fly. So there's no customization that you can do on the MedX equipment that even comes close to the like per person changes that you can get on that Renex stuff. So it's really
so the instructor can change the cam whilst the trainee is actually exercising. Wow. Yep. Yeah, I think I saw someone. I think it was Fred. Yeah. I think Fred Hahn was doing the pull down. And I think because Jeff Tomaszewski's obviously got a background in all this stuff, working with the Renex guys.
If this was the flat part of the cam here, and as you're pulling down, the band only gets to here, you can crank it so that it flattens out based on the person's arm width, their seat position, all those different things. So the strength curve is absolutely perfect as opposed to just adjusting the seat on MedX equipment to where the actual cam doesn't change. Like the mechanics of it a little bit around the band, the Kevlar strap might change a little, but this is perfectly flush every single time. So it's just a smoothness that's unequivocal. So
you prefer the Renex machines to the MedX and Nautilus machines for the most part?
I mean, if I'm being picky, they're all three great machines. But Renex also holds a special place in my heart because that's the stuff I learned on. So
yeah. And I know we get, obviously Josh might be listening to this, and if you are listening, Josh, I am very keen to have you and Ken and whoever's still part of Renex on the show. Yeah. On the show to talk about this stuff, because I know there's a real kind of tension and conflict that goes on in here, and doing what I can to try and alleviate that and make it a bit more productive. And if I can, because I'm all about trying to help those businesses. If we can get more people buying Renex machines, and I believe they are still making them, not kind of mass production, but they're kind of, what do you call it, made to order.
Yeah, I think, but it's like buying a Tesla or something.
I understand that, yeah. But
I mean, I'm sure if you've got the money to do it, I'm sure Ken would build it for you.
There are some high income individuals that listen to this show who are interested. Trust me. So I'm quite happy to promote that. And I do think that I wonder if, maybe you could argue that maybe MedX did this in a way, but a lot of businesses start out delivering products and services to higher end markets in order to, generate enough profit to grow. That happened with recycling. It's happened with probably a bunch of products and services that I can't recall off the top of my head. And that's how they often start. In fact, that's what Elon Musk did with Tesla. I think they started with the high end and then they worked their way down. So, maybe, and you can argue that ARX are doing that, right? ARX probably at the moment serving a higher end niche, high income, private individuals, that kind of thing. And maybe they will, them or others will create products, because I know there are other competitors out there that serve those other markets. But maybe Renex can do the same thing in terms of providing their style of machine to other markets, should they build a business model that can actually go that far, if that makes sense.
So I can't speak to exactly what their aspirations are with that sense, but from what I remember and talking with Kevin and speaking about Josh a little and stuff too, and because he's a big part of the Renex, with Hutchins, there's just not the drive there. they don't want to be Elon Musk. They don't want to be the next big fitness thing in the industry. They want to make equipment when they want to make it for people who they want to make it for. And they don't want to be, entitled to anyone else. And I think that is what's kind of held it back from being more mass produced already. So I don't know that more people being interested in it would still necessarily maybe push it to the next level. If you don't have that drive, then that's not what you want to do. So maybe somebody else could buy the designs and then mass produce it. I'm not sure, but from what I remember, I wouldn't foresee Ken Hutchins and Josh trying to mass produce Renex equipment all of a sudden.
Okay. Yeah, no, good point. And it's just throwing it out there, I guess, see what happens.
Yeah.
So
it'd be great, but
yeah. Yeah, no, I'm just, I guess in a way I'm saying a lot of this from quite a kind of a selfish position in that it would be nice to have more access to their kind of equipment because like, as I said, I really enjoyed, trying it out at Kevin's place. So let's talk about your book again for a moment. So I wanted to just understand what led you to write this. So why write this book?
So I think I said in the beginning, I've kind of teetered around with the idea of writing a book for a long time. I've started a few different books at certain points throughout my life. And then having that kind of, aha moment when I started with Strength Studio, there were just so many new things that came into my life all at once. So, I read The Bulletproof Diet by Dave Asprey and was really inspired by that, tried keto. Started reading The Renaissance of Exercise, was just blown away by Ken Hutchins and like the specificness. I don't know if you've read The Renaissance of Exercise, but
I haven't,
it's this thick and it is super dry. But it's so interesting to read just from a technical perspective, how exercise works. And I never read anything like that. And I was just inspired. And I sat down and I started plugging away at this thing. And I had known that I knew what I wanted the book to be called before I ever wrote it. And I had an idea a few years ago to write this book about exercise, but didn't have the inspiration for it. And it was just kind of right place, right time. I wrote the whole thing in probably 2 months. And then it took another 1.5 years to edit it and get people to read it and do all those things. And that's why I say, like, if I could go back and change it, it never would have been published because I would have just kept tweaking it and adding new stuff and all the things I learned. But there was just like this flash of inspiration, wrote it all down, said, I'm not touching it anymore. And then here it is. So
awesome. Yeah, no, I've enjoyed it. And I was flicking through it this morning and I like the H2LGN, which is how to look good naked, training curve. And we'll perhaps, if with your permission, maybe embed this in the blog post of this. And you've got basically a training curve where it's got, is it intensity along the x-axis? I can't remember what's on the y-axis.
I believe so. I've got it right in front of me here.
Yeah, and I thought it was quite funny because have you got it in front of you, have you?
Yeah, so it's strength level on the y-axis and then time on the x-axis.
That's it. And then you've got a little crisscross where it's like, this is where most people stop in terms of intensity, traditional. And then, you've got, this is where most exercise protocols go to. And it's like really low level of intensity. Yeah. And then you've got like, this is where most people give up. And like the bottom is like, this is where you should go to. And I thought that was quite, I've not seen it. I've seen lots of graphs in this space, from the likes of Doug and people like that. But like, I've not seen one like that. I thought that was quite original. So well done.
Yeah. So that's actually, I can't take credit for that. That came from Kevin Ness at My Strength Studio. That was part of our sales presentation. And the big thing over there, because we're such a niche market there too, is how do we conceptualize these ideas for people? So that's one of the best things I took away from that company was different visuals that I can show people what does high intensity training look like, because I can tell them 1,000 times, but they have to feel it, right, to experience it, to understand it. But if I can give them kind of a visual comparing to what they might traditionally do, for whatever reason, that just seems to click with people a little bit more. So I really try to figure out ways to conceptualize it visually.
Yeah. Is at My Strength Studio, is Kevin focused? Because I understand there's some real like hit nerds, like real hardcore hit people that like training there because of the reasons we've already discussed, the fact that they've got great equipment or very rare great equipment. Now, is that the majority of people that train there, or is it similar to DS in terms of like affluent, busy professional types?
I would say the majority is probably the second, but then a good portion is like biohackers and stuff like that as well that find out about through Dave Asprey or Tim Ferriss's website, and then kind of go down the chain and read Body by Science, and they go on Doug's website, and then they find Strength Studio, because I think it's the only one listed in Minnesota on his website. I don't think Discover Strength is, but I could be wrong.
Okay.
But yeah, so we get quite a few people, and they were, or they still are, Bulletproof. Sellers.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, they sell Bulletproof products.
So they sell all the Bulletproof stuff there. So I believe they're on the Bulletproof website as well. So if you go down that wormhole, then I think you can find them on there.
That's not a bad place to be. Certainly quite good for SEO for his website, I'm sure.
Yeah.
To be listed on Bulletproof. That's cool. Interesting stuff. All right. So I just wanted to, I guess, in terms of the book, before we kind of, I guess, start getting towards the end of this podcast, I wanted to, obviously I encourage people to pick up the book, and we'll certainly link to that from the show notes. But do you want to just quickly go over the kind of training diet recommendation that you outline in the book for people to get a taste of that?
Yeah, for sure. So it's funny when you said the ebook that you wrote was basically Tim Ferriss's slow carb mixed with Body by Science. That's essentially what this is. I'm not shy about saying that all these ideas I have were not originally my own. I took a lot of concepts that I like and simplified them and took the things that worked for me and just applied them. And in the book, I'm pretty open about be slow with this progress. And I try to break everything down into multiple phases. So I'm a huge proponent of intermittent fasting. I have 3 different zones that I talk about in the book. So the first zone is like 12 hours of fasting every day. I believe it's less than 150 grams of carbohydrates. And it's something that you should be able to do 7 days a week. Like, what is the minimum thing you can do to still see over time some results? Like your progress might be this slow little curve here. And then you step your way up to zone 2. Say it's less than 100 grams of carbs a day, 16-hour fasting. You should be able to do this 3 to 5 days a week if you're really serious about it. Well, now your angle's going up a little bit as far as your progress. And then zone 3, maybe 1 to 2 days a week. In the beginning, kind of limiting to less than 50 grams of carbohydrates a day, really experimenting with ketosis, being strict with alcohol consumption so that you don't have any, unnecessary carbs or caloric intake. And then if you do that, I mean, you're blast off from there, right? For most people, obviously, depending on body type and stuff. I'm a huge advocate of going to an RN or an RD, to like a registered dietitian or a nutritionist, just to get blood testing. Like, there's a lot of people who could see incredible results just from finding out on paper that they're allergic to gluten or dairy. And if they can see that in front of them on a test and just cut those things out, they can see progress without fasting, without doing any of that other stuff, cutting down inflammation. So that's kind of the quick summation of that. Like, I took out a bunch of Dave's stuff about inflammatory foods and stay away from these types of vegetables. And, he's very scientific and breaks everything down. Mine's like, what is the minimum effective dose for diet? Okay, here it is. There's 3 ways to do it. Try each of them, see what works for you. And then on the exercise side, it's Body by Science. It's the big 5 with some modifications for body weight and some band training, things like that, with an option to add in a couple extra exercises. It becomes a big 7, so low back and calves. And that was basically the routine that I used to do at Strength Studio, was a big 7. So that's where the inspiration was. I finished Body by Science. I love Doug's stuff, but I thought he was even a little long-winded too. And that book is great, but it's hard if you don't know about high intensity training. How do you, again, conceptualize for people an easy way?
Yeah.
So with the diet part, go ahead.
No, sorry. I'm like, I shouldn't interrupt him. No, just what you said about Body by Science is so true, because like I've given that book to a few people, and I gave it to my brother-in-law. And he literally, like, I ordered it in hard copy and I sent it to his house. And I was like, I'm going to change your whole life, because he'd always been into fitness. He'd had a serious motorcycle accident, many broken bones. And so, by definition, could not exercise, could not do a lot of different movements that he used to do in the past. And, I thought Body by Science was ideal because, pushing through those planes of movement might be the safest and best thing for him. I asked him, how did you get on with the book? And he kind of had to think about it for a moment to remember. And then he was like, oh yeah, I didn't really didn't really make sense to me. So I didn't finish it,
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my God. And he's gone back.
I know, yeah.
Yeah. And obviously there's other people I've given it to who are like, yeah, loved it. Like, because they got it and they immersed themselves in it, but they were perhaps like more of maybe they were slightly more intelligent and could absorb it better, but like, and not to be disrespectful to my brother-in-law. I mean, it's not that he's not intelligent, but maybe he just didn't have an open mind to it. And I think that's the case. And sadly, he's doing stuff. When I talk to him about what he's doing, I'm like, you could be getting better results safely, because he's in a place where if he does the wrong things, then his body's going to deteriorate faster. Yeah. So I'm always trying to encourage, if he were to do the stuff in Body by Science, and he would have much greater function, better quality of life, is my belief. And it's so sorry. That's what I was going to say is you think Body by Science is just going to be like a panacea for most people. Yeah. But even a book written as well as it is, there are some people who they need some other gateway drug. They need how to look. I don't remember the title then. How to Look Good Naked. They need my shitty ebook.
Yeah. So it's not a book written for Ken Hutchins. Like, I didn't write the book, so Dr. Doug McGuff is gonna have his mind blown. It's for somebody who is probably indoctrinated with mainstream gym culture and thinks that the only way to get in shape is through endless hours of cardiovascular work and lifting weights nonstop on end 5 days a week, like I used to think. I mean, this is a book basically that I wrote to myself, 20 years ago or 10 years ago to save myself a massive amount of time. So breaking down some myths. I don't know if you've made it to the myth part, but there's a few different things that I kind of break down. Again, just what are the big themes that we see that are, bombarding people from Nike and from Under Armour and from all these companies? I love The Rock. I see The Rock's Instagram every day. The Rock doesn't know shit about exercise. He's just a giant Samoan guy and he's got great genetics. Like, he could do whatever he wants. He could do what we do, steroids, and still be that big. Yeah. And steroids help for sure. But he doesn't have to do his monster gym sessions, but he does. And that's like his thing. But people see that and they naturally assume, if I want to be like that, I have to do that. Well, I can't do that. So why would I even try? And this book is just, the idea is, how do we make exercise approachable? Well, I break it down and give yourself 3 days a week, 45 to 60 minutes in the beginning. And there's phases to the exercise too. And don't even go in to work out. Just go to visit the machines, essentially. Like, don't try to go in and, blow up. The first couple weeks should just be, get used to what you're doing. Find a time that works for you. And I say that in the book. And then the second phase is, maybe start doing some exercise, go through the form, see what your time under load is like, start messing around with weights, see how you feel afterwards. And then finally we get to the go in, don't mess around anymore. Let's do it in 20, 30 minutes and then get on with your day. And I think that approach is great for people just because they want something they can actually do and stick with. And, I think, Jim kind of said this the other day too, and it really got me thinking about ARX and the future of training with people who have no experience with it. What are the masses willing to do? Because it's not this. It's not. They don't want to come to Discover Strength. They don't want to go to My Strength Studio. They don't want to go to CrossFit even. They don't want to do anything. They want the actual minimum effective dose. And how can we potentially reach those people and get them enthusiastic about exercise? My favorite part, I'll retract this and say my favorite part of Rec this year was Doug McGuff's speech. Like, I got teary-eyed at the end when he was like, this is going to save the world. And it's true. I firmly believe that. But you can't start somebody on this is going to save the world. They have to start with what will you actually do? And I think this is something that people would actually do. So
yeah,
that's my pitch.
Yeah, no, well said. And I think a number of us got quite emotional after Doug's keynote. I know my friend Sean, who came with me from Ireland, was really tearing up.
I heard you say that. Yeah, I think that's great. Great.
It was really nice actually. It's a nice moment because you're all there trying to make a difference. Trying to be successful in your own business and in your personal training, and to hear someone really kind of validate what you're doing is powerful.
Yeah, for sure.
Cool. All right. So let's think about kind of wrapping this one up. I just want to ask you a couple things.
Yeah.
What book in high intensity training have you recommended the most?
Probably Body by Science. Mm-hmm. I think 4 Hour Body is great. I really like Tim Ferriss's ideas. I think he's good about getting people excited. Besides my book, I think my book's a great starter for people. I've given away quite a few copies, one to you, one to Doug. I actually got to sign one at Rec, so that was fun.
Who'd you sign that for?
Gosh, I can't remember her name. She was a studio owner, I want to say, out in Oregon. But I don't know, super nice lady. If she's out there and she's listening to this, I'm sorry, I forget your name, but I'm
Celeste. Was it Celeste? Is that Oregon or she? No, she's.
Yes, I think it might be.
Yeah. I don't.
Anyways.
I can't remember the exact location. Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah. But that's great. And then Ellington Darden's new high intensity training is great too.
Yeah, awesome. Okay. Really random question. And I have a bunch of questions that sometimes I'll pick from because I've stolen them from other people's podcasts.
Okay.
Just curious to hear what you might have to say to this. When you hear the word successful, what does that mean to you? And you can't say Steve Jobs or Elon Musk or someone like that.
Oh, I wouldn't say that. I would say, to me, success is, not having to snooze the alarm, wanting to get up and just do whatever I've been passionate about that day. And sometimes I snooze at DS, I'm not going to lie, but I feel like I'm working in a direction to where, I'm excited about what I do. And I feel pretty successful and pretty blessed to be at the company that I'm with and to be where I'm at right now. But, I wouldn't mind having Luke's schedule either. So.
Awesome. I appreciate the rawness and the honesty. That was awesome.
Yeah.
So what's the best way for listeners to find out more about you, Logan?
So the website is pretty bare bones right now, but it's a good starting spot. It's just lookgoodnaked.com. You can Google me. There's probably stuff on there I don't want you to see. I'm on Facebook at Logan Emmett, EMMETT. And then my email is just my first and last name. So Logan Herlihy at gmail.com or Logan at howtolookgoodnaked.com. Cool. With the number as well.
Awesome. Nice one. And for everyone listening, to find the blog post for this episode, please go to highintensitybusiness.com/Logan. And for all episodes, please go to highintensitybusiness.com/podcast. And until next time, thank you very much for listening.
Discover how to achieve your health and fitness goals, become a great personal trainer, and build a successful high-intensity training business. Check out highintensitybusiness.com. highintensitybusiness.com.